To go through. Okay, hiring like we do. What do we do? What do we do here at Light? First of all, we're a fractional CFO. That's the bulk of what we do is accounting services. We also do business strategy and executive coaching, and we have a sister company, Dale Carnegie of North Dakota and Northwest Minnesota too. So we can help you with your people and we can help you with your numbers. And what else is there? If we can solve those two problems, life should be pretty easy. We can't help you with your marriage or raising your kids yet, so that those are added services that maybe will come in the future. Fun disclaimers, just that this information is used just for illustration purposes, easy mostly when we go through tax stuff. This is really more softer skills, so a little less disclaimer needed. These are things that seem to work for us as Light Consulting, and you may have varied results based on your industry and type of employees you're trying to attract. So, the biggest thing when it comes to hiring that we often get wrong, and the only reason I can speak to this stuff is because I've made all the mistakes and I watched people make the mistakes too. So, when it comes to these lessons, it's because I learned these lessons and relearn them. So slow is smooth, smooth is fast. When it comes to hiring, this is a phrase that the Navy SEALs use when it comes to doing anything. And what they mean by that is planning and being intentional about the process on the front end saves you so much time on the back end. So if we think about how many of us have ever made a bad hire, or experienced a bad hire in our organization. Probably almost everybody who's had any experience can raise their hand to that. And often, maybe even on their first day or their first week, we're like, oh shoot. That was not the right hire. That was not the right decision. And we know that. And maybe in somewhere in the process, we didn't listen to our intuition or we went through the process too fast. So really understanding, because you're gonna, when you see the list of the things that we go through, you're gonna be like, "Ooh, that's a lot." But the thing is, one, you can move through that pretty quickly. Like you can get all of that done in a week or less. And it's super important because this person is hopefully going to be with you for a long time. In our organization, we tease that you sign in blood, you can't leave, it's you have to be here forever, which we also know isn't true because we have had two individuals leave our organization in the last 4 years. But slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So we go through this hiring process slowly so that we get it right and we don't have bumps down the road. So there's four real components to the hiring process. First one actually starts when you're not hiring. And this is about your employment brand. Who am I as an organization and what type of people am I trying to attract? So for Light Consulting, we don't advertise and do social media updates and all that stuff to attract clients. We actually are in the position where we have a full amount of clients. We can't take on too many too fast because then our other clients would suffer from that. So all of our presence is really about attracting the right type of people from an employment standpoint. So, what does that brand look like? What are our core values? What are our culture? What are we speaking into the universe? And we'll go through that. The second phase is the interview process. So, what does that look like? How do you do that slow and smooth process? And then some tools that we use to make sure that it's the right fit. And then what do you do at the beginning of their offer acceptance and that first week to really make sure that they have a great experience and you're in alignment with your employment brand? So the first thing is the employment brand. So this is stuff that you're doing all of the time. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're hiring at the time. What it means is who are you as an organization? So we have a dental office on here, we have a video production group, we have engineer on here, and all of those organizations have their own brand from a who are we trying to attract from a customer base, but also keeping in mind who are we trying to attract from an employment base? Who do we want to work with us? So, and the best way to do that is just to live your culture and share that with the universe, if you will. Usually via social media is the easiest and most efficient way. Other ways would be through having conversations in the community. And if you are in a specialty like engineering, like dental, having some of that presence on a university campus in the engineering department, in the dental department, and being like, we are the place to work in this city, in the huge city of Holly, Minnesota. You got a couple options even of dental. So if I want to work small town, I want to work at Holly Family Dental. So really it's about attracting the right people and being transparent in what you put out there for the world to see is really who you are. So at Light, we do a lot of community involvement. We do a lot of internal celebration and all that stuff. And we don't just do it for the social media piece. And Drew can speak to that because we often forget to take pictures and send them to her as our marketing director is we do it because that's part of our culture. And then we need to be reminded that we want to share that culture with the world because what the situation that we're in is we now have what we call the bench. So we have a list of people who want to come work for our organization when the time is right, either for them or for us, well, for both at the same time. So be who you say you are and take the coffee. And what I mean by that is there's lots of people who will reach out to you in various stages of your career, and we are so busy. Like all of us are so busy. We have very little openings in our calendar, and take the coffee. So if you have a young person or a person any stage of their career really that is showing interest and wants to learn from you or learn from your organization, set that appointment, even if it's just a 30-minute phone call or Teams or Zoom call, and embrace that person. Come with open arms and an open mind to learn more about them. This is, again, how we have a bench of people that want to come work at our organizations, is because we take those conversations, even if we're not ready, even if we're not hiring at the time, because if it goes well, then we want to put them on the bench, which means then we call them up when it's time to hire the next position. And it makes hiring so sometimes we don't even have to post. We can just go to the bench and say, based on our needs at this time, these people fit that. Let's start moving them through the interview process. So employment brand is super important. Now, the job description and the job posting. This is also something that we often get wrong. So what we do is we take the old job description that's always been for said position and we throw it on Indeed or LinkedIn hiring or something like that. And a couple of things that need to be done before you post the job description is one, we need to review that job description to see if it's still current for the actual activities that are going on. When it comes to our core competencies and that section of the job description, you want to make sure it's close, but not narrow enough that the person is going to be inflexible in doing things outside of that job description. The other thing that's super important is the first part of that job description. Putting your core values out there for the world to see is important for cultural alignment. So our core values at Light are love like Jesus, intentional living, give grace, help others, and trust that anything is possible. And why that's important to put on there is if you are, in our case, our first core value is a bold core value of love like Jesus. And it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. And it doesn't even mean that you have to be a believer and all of that stuff. But what it does mean is if you're the opposite of that, that probably won't work here. And then we don't have to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations because people just see that and they understand, okay, if I am the opposite of that, I probably shouldn't apply to this organization. And we have the opportunity to set those for ourselves. The other thing that I think is important and is a miss a lot of times in job applications or job descriptions is getting them. A Dale Carnegie principle is getting the person to say yes, yes right away. And one of the how you do that in a job description is the first couple sentences are questions. Do you like a fast-paced yet fun environment? Do you love numbers, right? Those would be questions that we would throw at the beginning of a job description for like consulting. And those couple questions are going to get them to read on. Because if they answer no to one of those questions, it's really part of your core culture. We don't necessarily want them to read on because now then we're wasting our time with somebody who isn't going to be a culture fit. And when we talk about hiring the right person, it's really about character and culture fit and less about can they do the job, because we can teach them to do most of the things, but we can't teach them how to show up on time. We can't teach them how to have a positive attitude, all of those things that we want to hire that are more important than the actual tasks themselves. So asking a couple questions at the beginning of the job description is unique. Most job descriptions don't say that, that align with your culture and your core values. Placing those core values in there is also important. Now, where you post is also important. So thinking about, so Indeed would be the number one job placement place. So that's where most people go when they're searching for a job, right? So probably post there. Now, do you need to spend the money to enhance your post or to put it up higher? That's really a business decision. It depends on who you're competing against in the market at the time, because you can like say I'm hiring for an accountant, or Matt's hiring for an engineer, or Joe's hiring for video production. You can search those things and see how many people are already there and who am I competing against currently, because maybe more is hiring 5 engineers and they have their salary listed there and it's higher than what we were going to do. So now we need to compete with that. How do we differentiate ourselves on Indeed so that we attract the right people? So that is important to look at what your competition is doing from a job description standpoint on Indeed if you're posting there. Don't just go there and post it. Actually pay attention to what the other groups are doing and then how you can differentiate to attract the people you want. Now, once it's posted on Indeed or any of those other sites, so some of you with larger organizations, you have your own website that you post it on. Now, the thing with your own website is it's great, but if I am not familiar with your organization, the likelihood that I'm going to go to your website to find a role is pretty low. So that's where marketing from a employment brand perspective is important. So thinking of your top employees in your organization, having them share those things on their social media. So whether that's Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever form in which they have influence or followers or people looking, that's where you want those things to be shared. So if I want another employee like Rachel Baki, I want Rachel Baki to share that there's an opening at Holly Family Dentistry. And that what that does then is all the people that are in her circle then see it and create opportunities. I would say that our last 5 hires, 3 have seen it first on social media. One was a phone call. We didn't even advertise. We just had somebody that we had on our bench and pulled them up. And only one came from Indeed they were seeking out that role. So just to give you a concept of people who follow other people, we want our organization and our employees to work with their friends, and why that is, as long as you have a fairly drama-free workplace, is because we want to do life together. Because my retention goes up if I like the people that I work with. And maybe some of your friends you don't like, but most of your friends you should like. But as we get older in our life, we get to weed through all of that and just pick people we like now. Uh, and the other thing that we do on the prospecting side is whenever we are hiring a position or if we get engaged to hire a position, we take time in our weekly team meeting to make a list. Who do you know that would fit this role? And literally setting aside time to brainstorm, to scroll through your LinkedIn and look at names, scroll through your contact list, all of that stuff. Do that, because then now you have people to reach out to that are a warm lead. So again, when it comes to our organization, out of the 14 people we've had come through, only two were cold. Only two were people that nobody in our team knew prior to them applying and being hired. So it's really important to do those things. Do those questions at the beginning of the job description, add your core values and your behaviors in there. Where you post, share it on your socials. People who like people that are great employees are going to be in alignment there. And then take time to make a list, just like you would if you were a salesperson. You would say, I'm going after so and so's business. Same thing when it comes to attracting people. Now that we have X number of resumes, we sort through them. Not a ton of time is spent on the resume itself, besides, like, say we're hiring for an accountant and we have this person has applied and they have zero accounting experience, they just have marketing experience, then probably not, and we don't know them at all. We're not even going to have a phone screen at that point. But for the most part, we phone screen anybody who is qualified in that. And why we phone screen, there's a couple different reasons we phone screen. One is how responsive they are to setting up that time, or even if we just blind call them and pull up their number and call them, see how they answer the phone. And then the biggest thing, so our chaos coordinator, our chaos manager, Betsy does this, is are they easy to talk to? Are they pleasant in their communication? Because if you don't meet that initial threshold, if I know just based on this 30-second conversation or this first 30 seconds that you're probably not going to be a culture fit in our organization, then I don't have to waste everybody's time with setting up an hour-long interview and going through the process. So this phone screen process can save you a ton of time because it only takes 5 to 10 minutes to have those quick conversations, less than 5 questions on the phone screen itself, because you're really just looking for how responsive are they, how do they answer the phone, and are they easy to talk to? So it's actually pretty simple to get through the phone screen. And again, we're in the world of accountants, so not everybody picks up the phone joyfully with your natural tendencies and account type traits. But it is important for our culture because we are client facing. Then comes after, so if you move past the phone screen, comes the first interview. So the first interview is with the hiring manager. In our case, it might be 2 individuals from the light team doing the interview with the candidate. And this is really about them sharing their story as the candidate and us sharing our story as our organization. Because this really, in an employment relationship, it needs to be a win-win on both ends. They have to want to work here, and we have to want them to work here. So it has to be this win-win relationship. We have to tell them about the organization and not overly salesy, like, oh, we do all this exciting stuff hey, guess what? If you work here, you're probably never going to take a trip in January, because January is really intense in our own organization. And we just be transparent in that, because if we aren't, and then they have something planned for January, then now I'm uncomfortable because I don't feel like I'm meeting the needs of the organization because I did that or I have that. So being super transparent and telling about the company, both the good and the hard, and it's really helpful for them to make an informed decision on whether they would fit. We had a great interview with an individual a few years back before we moved into our new building. And we showed him so the interview went really well, and we were so excited, and we were telling him about how we're going to move because we're building this building. And then we showed him the floor plans, which we have an open concept floor plan in our office, and he about died. He's like, nope, that won't work for me unless that closet is my office. I actually don't want to interact with people. And so thank goodness that we shared those floor plans with them, because going into the next stage in the next office, he would have had some anxiety about being in an open office concept. So share about your company and then ask lots of open-ended questions so that they can share about themselves. Now, HR will tell you can't ask certain questions, which is true. Don't ask about their age or any of the protected class stuff, but you can ask questions that might bring that stuff out. And a couple of those would be, tell me about your passions. What do you do outside of work? Those will give you some of those insights. What does family look like for you? That's kind of in the gray area. And then the other one is, what haven't you shared that you're willing to share that we should know? And the first time I got asked that question was when I was interviewing at Rowers, for those of you who are familiar with my career journey. And this is where I had the opportunity to share at the time that I was a single mom. So that's important for my employer to know from a flexibility standpoint. There was no questions before that that would trigger me to share that information. And it's also, like I said, important for my employer to know those things. So asking some of those questions in a very open-ended way is important, even in interview number one. The last thing that you want to make sure that you do is explain the hiring process at your organization and what the expectations can be from a timeline perspective, and then hold to those. Because one thing that creates a lot of animosity in a candidate is when you said you're gonna get reach back out to me by Friday, and I didn't get any reach back by Friday. So now as a candidate, I'm telling myself a story that I'm not good enough for your organization. I did something wrong, all of those things. Because right now in our culture, we have a lot of mental health stuff going on. So we want to be conscious of sticking to the timelines that we committed. So if I told you I'm going to get back to you by Friday, I better do that for multiple reasons, not only for just what you have going on, but now I'm establishing and building trust. So I said something, I better do that, because if I do end up hiring you, I need you to trust me from an organization perspective. And if I break that trust even before you get in the door, that's going to not set us up for success as well. So explaining the hiring process and sticking to the timeline that you verbalize. I often have other people in the room all the time when I am interacting with people. Drew can attest to this, because I end up saying something and then my team gets to hold me accountable to that, because I end up having a pretty busy schedule that maybe I can't keep those commitments. But it's important. So whether that's writing down, we'll call back by Friday, and even if it's Friday at 11:59, send the email, shoot the text, say, hey, this is the next step in our process, and be kind. If they are not moving forward in the process, you can give them that we're moving forward with other candidates. Like there's nothing wrong with that, and it's super important to keep that door and option open. So they get past interview number one. Hiring managers like, yes, they're great, all of the things. The next step in our process between interview one and two is assessments. So the two that we do in our organization is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator and that Enneagram. So these two assessments tell us quite a bit about the individual. So the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator will tell us, how does that person work? How are they hardwired? What are going to be some things that maybe don't work in them? So the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is, or MBTI, is your inborn preferences. And the Enneagram is more in alignment with how are we going to behave in the environment. So my greatest example of this particular one would be accounting coordinator position somebody applied for. In doing her Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, came back an ENFP. So accountants typically, they can be E or I, so they can prefer extroversion or introversion, usually sensing, thinking and feeling is about 50-50. But that last letter, the J, them judging versus perceiving, means we like structure, we like plans, all of this stuff. Those who prefer perceiving are flexible, spontaneous, don't like to be tied down. So having somebody in a data entry position for accounting, where you're doing the same thing every day, you're sitting at your desk most of the time, and that personality type doesn't work. So she's been doing that for 15 years. And what we ended up doing, because she was a great culture fit, is we have this other thing over here that is actually disruptive to our accountants. We do property management for some of our commercial clients, and we're going to have you do that. And she is just thriving in that. So if we would have said only do accounting, she would not probably be super happy with what she's doing. She probably would be okay in the environment, but the what would get draining on her. It'd be like writing with her non-dominant hand all day. So rather than forcing her into something that she wanted to do because she had experience in it, we did the assessment so that we could say, you're a great fit from the culture perspective, and you're actually better over here. And now she can be really happy in her position. So those assessments are super important to do. Then comes second interview. So then in the second interview, they're reviewing the personality assessment, usually with me as the owner, and most educated on those personality things. And then we do that for about 30 minutes, and then we do a team meeting. So whether we bring in lunch for the whole team or whoever's in the office to meet this individual, and not in a very like, here's our list of questions. It's more in a casual way of, do we want to work with this person? Do we want to sit shoulder to shoulder 5 days a week with this individual and spend 40 hours a week with this individual? And that's really what that is about. So a real casual setting. So whether we bring in food or we've done happy hours, we've played games, done those type of things to kind of see how they interact with the overall team in case there's any red flags there. Now, not often, but sometimes after the second one, there might be a little bit of like, I'm not sure. Now, a couple things. If you have the luxury of trusting your gut in these decisions, 100% of the time, your gut has some validity to it. Now, whether they can work through that in a year into it, maybe, I would say more often than not, your gut is right. And so trusting that intuition, I call that the Holy Spirit, those urges in your body that say, just don't think this is going to work. And why I want you to trust that, even if all the evidence says that it should work, is because a bad hire is worse than no hire. You would be better off starting over than hiring somebody bad, or somebody that won't fit, somebody that won't work out. So trust yourself, especially if you've been doing this a while. You know those little things that are going to become bigger things in an organization. But if you're still kind of, I think I don't know where I'm at with this one and want some more reassurance, there's a couple things that you can do. One, you can ask for those references at the beginning of the interview process or after interview number one, and give them a call and ask tough questions about that individual. The other thing that we do when we say, okay, you'd be a really great culture fit, but I'm not sure about your technical ability, because it's so interesting to me how we have all of these things. So we can put all these things on a resume. I had an individual who had been in accounting for 30 years and then got them into the organization. And when we had a conversation about having a negative liability, therefore a debit balance, they didn't quite understand that that was wrong. And that's something that is fairly basic to accountants. For you non-accountants, you're like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, and that's okay. But for accountants, that should be pretty basic, especially if you have 30 years of experience. So what I did insert it into the process after that is I have an exercise. So if you want to be an accountant at our organization and I'm not 100% certain on your technical abilities, I have an exercise for you to go through. Now, it's less about is it right than it's about how you went about doing it and how you presented your findings to the group in then the third interview. So again, our exercise is we take a general ledger and a trial balance, and we have you make an income statement, balance sheet, and P&L. So if you guys have any accountant friends who are looking for an exercise, you just do that. Or I said, income statement and the P&L are the same. Balance sheet and cash flow. And the cash flow messes everybody up every time. And they got to Google it and go back to their textbooks or whatever to figure it out. But it's not about like, do you know how to do a cash flow? It's about, are you willing to do the work to figure it out? So that's why we insert those exercises and reference checks into those. Not always, this is an optional piece of our process. And then the third interview is what we call family dinner. So moving through the process, family dinner includes the kids for a few reasons. So if they have kids, I want to see how they interact with having that your kid and your future boss there and how that interaction goes on. If my kids are present, so I have a 15-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son, having them present is also interesting because you interact with a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old differently. And I want to see those behavior traits. We're a family-friendly organization that needs to be a part of our culture. If your kids are here, we love that. And having somebody who is totally turned off to children wouldn't fit in our culture. So if your culture is super professional and you never interact with spouses or kids or anything like that, maybe it's not as important to insert this. The other thing that you can see in this is how do they interact with the server? And once in a while, I've even thought about asking the server to screw up the order for the candidate to see how they interact when something doesn't go their way or react when something doesn't go their way, right? So are they still exhibiting the core behaviors and the core values that happen in our organization, even when things don't get wrong? But if you just bring the kids, things aren't going to go right anyway. So that's a challenge in itself. You don't have to do any special tricks. So after that third interview, pretty much at this time, you really know. You probably don't even do the family thing if you're not feeling really confident into it, is the offer. And how do you deliver the offer? So even leaving family dinner, it would be you can expect an offer in your inbox by the end of the week or whenever it can be done. And the how much thing, that should be conversations that you've had in the prior interviews, even in the phone screening, asking the question of what is your salary requirement is a really soft yet direct question. And sometimes people will bump up what they're making by 20%, who knows? But then starting point. So the one thing that we're experiencing in our market is some salary differentials based on the organizations that you're with. So if Carla from the United Way is still on here, she doesn't have this robust budget where she can just pay everybody what they might make in private industry of $1 billion company, right? So she needs to know what is your salary requirement. And if you want to put some caveats to that, like if you're in nonprofit and if you're in a smaller organization of we might not be able to meet it, but I'd like to know so we can have a robust discussion about it. You should be asking those questions on the front end so that you're not wasting time for that. So we have had some conversations with people at a $1 billion organization in the Fargo-Moorhead market. And when we hear their number, we're like, well, in 10 years, we'll probably have another conversation when we potentially can pay you that. But the other thing too is don't discount it either. So even if they're making a tremendous amount at their current organization, they're having a conversation with you for a reason. So just be transparent. So let's just say, for example purposes, I'm having a conversation and that person says, I make $150,000 now. And my budget for this position was 75, right? So I'm just going to be transparent and say, we're not there. We're actually not even close to there. Do you want to continue conversations knowing that you're going to have to take a substantial pay cut to work in our organization? And that doesn't mean that I won't come up from the 75, especially if I believe from a profitability owner perspective that I can make that back or get them to X in a few years. It just means we're going to have a nice conversation about money, and it doesn't have to be emotional. And it is kind of it's a touchy thing because we often, as employees, put our worth in what we're getting paid. Your worth is not in what you're getting paid. That's actually just an economic calculation based on supply and demand of your current skill set. Has nothing to do with who you are, what you're worth as a person. It just means you have this skill and the market is willing to pay this. So keep that in mind when you're having those emotional conversations about compensation. How do you deliver the offer? So the offer needs to be delivered, not just, hey, here's an email. The only way we'll deliver an offer via email is if we've talked about compensation, so we know it's just going to be basically a checkbox. And then we do a video presentation of it. So I'll have the offer letter. I'll have a little circle with my head on it. This software we use to do those videos is called Loom. And then I'll walk through the offer. This is what you're getting for our base compensation. Here's our PTO. Here's our health and other benefits that you get in our organization. And here's anything that's special for you as an individual or as this position. So verbally walking through the offer. Now, why do a video versus just sending an email? Multiple reasons. The biggest thing is that only 7% of communication is actually the written words. The other 93% is in vocal, in how I inflect my voice, the different tones I'm using, and body language. So I can be really excited in a video, or I could be really not excited, and the chance of them accepting that position is pretty low. So you can do that. You can invoke an emotion through a video where it's very difficult and can maybe even be misinterpreted via just written communication. So we deliver it either in person or over the, like in a Teams or Zoom call, or we send a video if we're confident that we've already talked through a lot of this stuff. And then how and what to negotiate. So I'm a numbers person, so I have, and I also am the owner. So if I end up negotiating somebody's salary higher, at the end of the day, it's just coming off my bottom line. So I don't have anybody else to report to when it comes to that. So sorry, Chad, no new dirt bike this year. We paid somebody too much. The beauty, or what, so if you're not in that position, which would be most of you, and you have this range, it's really about where is the sweet spot in that and what can we do to do that. Now, if they are over negotiating on their end from a candidate standpoint, they keep coming back to you and they're almost like never satisfied, asking a question of, it feels like there's some resistance here, tell me more about that. Because if you've gone through this entire process and there's still resistance, that's not a red flag, but that's something that needs your attention, and you need to hash that out. Because if they're going to do this in everything that you give them from a task perspective, or even just 50% of what you give them in a task perspective in the future, you probably don't want them in your organization. So it's okay for them to challenge you, but for them to challenge you over and over and over again, then it's like, this, I must have missed something in the interview process. So keeping that stuff in mind. All right, acceptance. So now they've accepted, and maybe they verbally accepted when you gave them the offer. Most of the time we have that case. Again, we spent a lot of time together, so we kind of know where they're going to be. So that acceptance is important, and making it a big deal from your end, expressing emotions is important. And from their end, paying attention to how they like to be appreciated. And then the other thing with that would be, of course, working out what that start date looks like, so you guys can be on the same page of when is this individual starting, so that you can set them up for success on their first day in week 1. And I didn't even know that I knew that this existed, but I did not know how robust this was till Drew inserted it. This is our onboarding process. So these are all the things that need to be done prior to day 1 of that individual coming. So there's a lot of things on here. A lot of them are pretty quick or small. A lot of it has to do with making sure that their desk and their technology is ready for them to work. It is nothing like says, oh, you're an afterthought. when somebody shows up on their first day and nobody's greeting them, and no, their computer is not ready, and you just give them the handbook to read. Like that is not a good experience. So I would, and I'm not saying that I haven't done that. I have done that. I have chosen to take meetings when I have a new employee start, and then they don't have a great first day experience. You want them to have such a great first day that they go home and tell their spouse, this is the most wonderful place. I cannot wait to go back. That's what you want to create on day one. So, and whether you take them to lunch on day one or that's just day in the first week, it can look a couple different ways. And now that you have their NBTI and their Enneagram, you can predict some of that behavior. So somebody who's heavily introverted, we don't want to overpower them with a bunch of meetings and a bunch of time with people. So we can be intentional about their week one plan. For sure, plan out that week one. One thing that one of our clients did, actually, the chamber that they do in that first month is they have the list of employees, and the new employee is supposed to spend some amount of time, so whether that's 15 minutes or whatever, with each one of the employees just to learn about them and their job. And that way, when they have, because they're really cross-functional there, because they're a small team, 20 some people, and do a lot of things, uh, then they know everybody. So it really is something that they think is that they do that is unique, I would say, and that the employees and new employees really value. So again, have that checklist, have somebody on your team be able to execute that and go through it. And then now that we have this new employee, we want to keep them. That's also important, right? We just invested a bunch of time in that, hiring slow. This is what we do from a meeting cadence and when it comes to outside of the actual tactical work that they have to get done. So we currently have a 2 times a week, 15-minute check-in. So we all hop on Teams, and this is really administrative. It's who's out today, who's doing what are some deadlines, what are you waiting on Sarah for, because that tends to be a thing, and understanding where in the world is Carrie today is one of the things that we got to experience today. She actually is in Florida and ran into somebody who used to live here at a stoplight. How unique. So that's what those check-ins really are about, just that quick things, quick administrative things, deadlines, what's our calendar look like, who's in, who's out. Then there's a weekly tactical meeting. So depending on the team that you're on, you meet weekly, you go through your priorities, what help do you need? We have high achievers in our organization, but that doesn't mean that one other thing with high achievers is they're not going to ask for help. So when they go through their lists and they have all of these things, and there's from a understanding perspective, you're not going to get all that done this week. We are actually going to help you, and this person's week is pretty light, so we're going to reallocate resources. That's really what's happening in that weekly tactical, is solving problems, communicating to everybody has one of these, so communicating to the organization, and then reallocating workload if needed. And then we do monthly lunch with the supervisor. So why we do lunch or coffee or happy hour or something is to get them out of the office and more comfortable sharing anything personal. We need to know how these people are doing as a human being. And then that actually helps their productivity. So if they're having trouble at home, or if they're having a teenager that is having some issues, we want to know that. We want to be a part of their life so that we can support them in their workload and be understanding and empathetic versus like irritated that they're not showing up on time, which again, we have a flexible work environment, so we probably wouldn't even know. But if there's a lot of that stuff going on, we don't know why that is, that's going to make a little bit of tension in the organization. And we just have eliminated that through that. We also have a monthly team celebration and updates. So we all come together as a team. We talk about how are we doing towards budget? So the financial piece, we talk about what are updates for incoming clients or potential employee hires in the organization. We celebrate who graduated from Dale Carnegie this last month. We celebrate who got certified in her Pilates instruction. We celebrate all of those things on a monthly basis, and birthdays. and anniversaries and all of that stuff. We were doing birthday lunches, but then we were going to lunch like all of the time. So, which is okay too. We have to eat every day. And then quarterly lunches with the supervisor and owner. So I get to touch base with every employee at least quarterly and ask them some of those questions. Now, one thing that is important, depending on your position, is really understanding your level of influence. So, one thing that I have a hard time remembering is that because I'm just Sarah, I'm your coworker. Like, I really don't like being called boss or any of that stuff. But I also need to understand that me having a one-on-one conversation or even a small group conversation with the supervisor and the team member is important, that I am taking time to be with them, to know them. That is super important. And when we do employee surveys, that's one of the things that they point out is valuable, that I am not above that, that I take time to do that. And to me, they're just my friends. So, but it also is important to remember that that's important and means a lot to them. And then we do annual reviews as well. We don't like to call them annual reviews, but there's no other really word to call them besides we're checking in with the goals you set. We've checked in throughout the year, but really saying, hey, what's this? We need to talk about compensation at that time, talk about what they're doing really well, give them lots of praise. There's a lot of science that goes behind actually not pointing out a lot of flaws in an individual because it doesn't benefit them. So how we lead and understand leadership is to be reward what we want repeated. So rather than pointing out that the clicking of your pen is irritating to me, I'm going to just find all the goodness in you and then amplify that. And all the other stuff will just go away. Not necessarily like you'll stop doing it, but it won't bother me because my mindset has shifted as your leader. And that's kind of it's a unique thing. I think it's different than how we've been taught from they can only be better if you tell them all the things. But because we do so much work with personalities, we can identify what is a work problem or process that maybe is broken or that we didn't train you properly on, and what is part of your personality that we can't change, because if we change that, then we change you, and then you're dissatisfied in your organization or in the organization. So really, if there's a work thing, but like you're not doing your particular work right or that flow or that process right, we'll correct those things from a training perspective. And again, that's on us as leaders. If they're not doing their job correctly, it's either we didn't train them how to do it right, or maybe the process is broken, or we need to modify something so that they can be successful, or maybe that's something that they shouldn't be doing. But when it comes to the quirky little things, we just accept and love them for who they are. That's all I have. Do you guys, what questions? I should say, who has the first question?
I got one.
Joe.
Yeah, so I guess as you have scaled, has there been a specific measurement that you are deciding when to hire?
Yes. So as we scale, how we kind of trigger that, and now that we're being much more planful than at first, we have almost like a full. So like I call it the stepstones. So here we have, let's just say 10 employees and they're 80% full. Now we're going to get them to 100%, maybe even 110% full, and then we're going to hire, and then our costs go up, right? And the new person maybe is only 50% full when they start, and then we can amplify, fill them up from a client perspective and then hire. So it's kind of like this step program. So not that I overwork the team to before we hire, but we get them to full before we hire, and then we offload
Mhm.
some client activities to the new person when we get that. So that's how we do it. And why I do it that way, one, it's less risky
Mhm.
because we have revenue that can offset those wages. And then two, it also creates this environment of thriving and overproducing so that our team understands. Alexis said it really well when she said, you're just high achievers. You just go above and beyond. And we kind of just we do that intentionally, or maybe not maybe it wasn't intentionally, but it ended up being the process that we go through. Other questions or
Do
thoughts?
you use a program, or how do you track your annual reviews and goals and tracking into things like that? So, from a
Yeah.
company your size.
Yeah, a company our size, we just do it in Excel. So we have a form that has the role competencies or the level competencies. So our accounting coordinator should have these soft skills like communication and some of those things. And then there's also role competencies from a task oriented things like understanding AP and AR. Those are role. And then for the next level, those competencies are shifted or amplified a little bit. And then that's how we move through it. And then we talk about if there's a gap in a competency and then what are we going to do to close that gap. So sometimes that closing that gap, let's just say it's effective communications. Well, high impact presentations could be an opportunity for you to learn something to close that gap. Or if it's just it's financial review or financial presentation, just exposure to that, and us as leaders being more intentional about having them come alongside people who are really good at that. So closing the gap or the plan to close the gap is really helpful. But the Excel sheet, uh, yeah, I will send you one that's blank and doesn't have everybody's stuff on it because it is helpful to see like from a visual standpoint. We even have on there their personality types, their date of birth, just for like I mean that's we can't discriminate or whatever, but we just like to know because we like to celebrate people. And then the other thing that we have on there is what's called red threads. So there's this book by Marcus Buckingham, Love and Work, and he talks about red that threads. What are the things that they love to do? Like Stephanie on our team, she's an extrovert. She loves to be in the community and those type of things. Also an accounting coordinator, which is data entry and some of that stuff. So making sure that she has enough red threads, 20% is the magic number according to the studies. She has to do 20% of her daily job tasks need to be in things that she loves. Then she'll love her job. So we are intentional about exposing her to other people and other opportunities outside of the daily task that I'll go into her red threads.
Very cool. Thank you.
One day an HRIS system, but not today. They're very expensive. Other questions?